Jake, this is a beautiful place. Can I redecorate the living room? Jessica's voice echoed with excitement as she stepped into the modern high-rise apartment. I froze mid-step, my heart taking a sudden leap. What are you doing here, Jake? I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands trembled. This was my home, our home. He had no right. Jake swaggered in behind Jessica, a familiar smug grin on his face. Hey sis, just thought we'd drop by. Been too long. I didn't need to be reminded. Flashbacks flooded my mind, memories of his betrayals, of him leaving us to fend for ourselves when things got tough. Dad emerged from his room, eyes lighting up. Jake, how've you been, son? He pulled Jake into an eager hug, his affection making my stomach churn. Guess what, Dad? Jessica's got an eye for design. Thought she could help spruce up the place, Jake said casually, his tone making it sound like he was doing us a favor. Jessica beamed as she twirled around the living room. We could start with new curtains and maybe some art on the walls. Anger bubbled up inside me. Jake, this is our home. You can't just walk in here and start changing things. Mom shuffled into the room, her hands wringing nervously. Emily, let's not make a scene. Jake and Jessica are family. Family? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. He left us, Mom. He left us, and now he thinks he can just stroll back in? Jake raised his hands in mock surrender. Calm down, Emily. We're just visiting. No harm in helping out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned on my heel and headed for the kitchen, needing a moment to catch my breath. The familiar scent of Mom's cooking barely soothed my frayed nerves. Mom followed, her steps hesitant. Em, please. Just give him a chance. Why, Mom? Why should I? My voice was softer now, strained with the effort of holding back tears. Because he's your brother, she replied, barely meeting my eyes. Family sticks together. I clenched my jaw, watching as Jessica's laughter floated in from the living room, mingling with Dad's deep chuckles. Jake had them all under his spell again. Taking a deep breath, I returned to the chaos that had invaded our home. Jessica was already measuring the windows, making plans like she owned the place. This is going to look amazing, she said, as if I wasn't even there. Jake met my eyes and smirked. See, Em, isn't it nice having someone take an interest in the place? Interest doesn't mean taking over, I snapped, the thin thread of my patience fraying. Dad stepped between us, a conciliatory smile on his face. Now, let's all calm down. We can talk about this like adults. I shook my head, knowing there would be no talking it over. This was just the beginning. The line had been crossed, and I felt the sting of betrayal fresh and sharp once again. The argument continued, with voices rising and falling like the tide against the shore. Grace hovered nervously, while Harold basked in the presence of his favorite child. The tension was a dense fog, choking out the peaceful life we'd managed to build in his absence. Later that night, lying in bed, I listened to the muffled conversations from the living room. Jake and Jessica were making themselves comfortable, their laughter grating in its obliviousness. Through the thin walls, Dad's voice carried, soft and indulgent. Jake's had a tough time, Em. We should support him. I clenched my fists under the covers. Support him? I had been here, holding this family together, sacrificing everything, and now he wanted support? I knew then that this visit was only the start. Jake was back, and chaos had come with him. My calm, ordered life was about to be turned upside down, and deep down, a part of me recognized that things would never be the same again. The next morning, I found Jake sprawled on the couch, Jessica cuddled up beside him, their whispering voices filling the room like an annoying background hum. I stirred my coffee, waiting for the inevitable. Sure enough, Jake stretched and yawned theatrically. So, Em, I've been thinking. We should talk about this apartment. Maybe rework the living arrangements. I didn't even bother to hide my irritation. This isn't up for discussion, Jake. You're not staying. Jessica sat up, her eyes cold. Jake has every right to be here, Emily. He's your brother. And this is his family home, Jake added, his tone dripping with faux concern. Before I could respond, Dad walked in, blissfully unaware of the brewing conflict. Morning, kids. What's all the fuss about? Jake pounced on the opportunity. Dad, I was just telling Emily we should discuss reworking the living arrangements here. Dad nodded, still in that morning daze. Might not be a bad idea. Freshen things up a bit. I stifled a groan and looked straight at Jake. You mean freshen things up by kicking me out? Jake chuckled, shaking his head. Don't be so dramatic, Em. We're family. We should be making decisions together. Decisions together? Like when you decided to leave us? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Tension thickened the air. Jessica jumped in, her voice saccharine sweet. Jake's trying to make amends, Emily? Isn't that what family's about? Funny how it's only about family when it benefits you. I shot back, my patience thinning. Mom entered the room, looking harried. Everyone, please, can't we just have one peaceful morning? Jake's eyes flicked between us, a calculated gleam in his gaze. He knew exactly what he was doing. All right, let's not fight. We can talk about this later. I clenched my teeth, biting back more heated words. I couldn't afford to lose my temper now. This was his game, to push and provoke until I broke. Seeing the tension wouldn't break, I went to check on Mom in the kitchen. She was cutting fruit, but her hands were trembling. You okay, Mom? She sighed. Emily, can't you and Jake try to get along? For us. For us. The familiar plea, always trying to bridge a gap that couldn't be mended. I just nodded. I'll try, Mom, but he needs to respect our space. As I was helping her, I heard footsteps behind me. Jessica leaned casually against the doorway. You know, Emily, you should really lighten up. This can be fun if you let it. Fun for whom? I asked, not bothering to hide my annoyance. For all of us, she replied, a sly smile creeping onto her lips. We're family now, remember? I forced a smile and carried the tray of fruit to the living room where Jake and Dad were laughing at some old story. This facade was sickening. The rest of the day passed in a blur of uneasy interactions and thinly veiled snide comments. Jake's presence lingered like a bad smell, a constant reminder of the chaos he brought. Dinner was a tense affair, with forced smiles and awkward silences. Afterwards, I found a quiet spot on the balcony, breathing in the cool night air. I needed a plan, a way to regain control, to protect our home from Jake's intrusion. As I stood watching the city lights, I felt a sense of resolve harden within me. This wasn't over. Jake had crossed a line, and things were about to get very real. He thought he could bully his way back into our lives, but he underestimated me. I turned back to the living room where Mom was setting up the couch for Jake and Jessica. The flicker of hope in her eyes was almost heartbreaking. But hope wasn't enough. Not this time. Inside, I approached Jake. He looked up, feigning surprise. What now, Em? I leaned in, keeping my voice steady. Just know this, Jake, you're not going to win this. His smirk was all the answer I needed. The battle lines were drawn. Now, it was time to fight. The next few days were filled with Jake and Jessica's attempts to tilt the balance in their favor. They moved through the apartment like they owned it, rearranging things, making snide comments. It felt like they were polluting every corner of our home with their presence. One evening, I walked into the living room to find Jessica flipping through a magazine. We should get a new sofa, she declared, barely glancing up. This one's so outdated. I clenched my fist. This sofa belongs to our parents, Jessica. You're not replacing it. Jake appeared behind her, eyes glinting with mischief. Why not, Em? It's just a sofa. Maybe it's time for a change. Mom took a step forward, trying to mediate. Jake, Emily, let's discuss this calmly. Jessica stood up, pushing her luck. It's just a suggestion, Emily. No need to get defensive. You're suggesting changes to a home that isn't yours, I shot back, struggling to maintain my composure. Dad, always quick to side with Jake, nodded. We could consider updating a few things, Emily. A few things? I asked, incredulous. You mean letting them take over? Jake's smirk widened. Calm down, sis. We're just making improvements. You always were too resistant to change. Resistant to change? The irony wasn't lost on me. He was the one who'd run away, leaving me to hold everything together. I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my anger in check. This isn't about change, Jake. This is about respect, something you obviously lack. Jessica rolled her eyes. You're overreacting, Emily. Jake's right. A few updates wouldn't hurt. It's time to move forward, not cling to the past. My blood boiled. Moving forward doesn't mean erasing everything that matters. You don't get it because you haven't been here. You haven't sacrificed anything for this family. The tension was palpable. Jake's grin faltered, his eyes hardening. Enough, Emily. This isn't just your decision to make. Before I could react, Dad intervened. All right, enough. Let's take a break. Emily, please try to be more open to their ideas. Open to their ideas? I repeated, staring in disbelief. What about respecting the life we've built here? Mom's eyes pleaded with me to back down, but I couldn't. Not this time. I turned and left the room, my heart pounding as I reached the sanctuary of my bedroom. The walls felt like they were closing in. Standing by the window, I watched the city lights flicker and pulse, trying to find some sense of calm. The door creaked open quietly. It was Mom. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Emily, I know this is hard, but please try to understand. Jake is still part of this family." "I know, Mom," I whispered, my voice strained. "But he needs to respect us, too." She sighed softly. "We all need to find a way to coexist. We can't keep fighting like this." She left, the silence thickening in her absence. I knew then that there was no middle ground with Jake. He wanted control, and he was using our parents' love to get it. A new plan began to form in my mind, a way to safeguard our home without tearing the family apart. The following morning, Jake and Jessica were already making themselves at home in the kitchen. "Morning," Jake greeted with exaggerated cheerfulness. "Morning," I replied tersely, grabbing a cup of coffee. Jessica looked up, a coy smile playing on her lips. "Maybe we could start looking at some new furniture this weekend?" Before I could answer, Dad walked in and clapped Jake on the back. "That's the spirit. What do you think, Emily?" I stared at them, determination stealing my resolve. "Sure, let's look at some options," I said, my voice steady. Jake didn't notice the fire in my eyes. This time, they wouldn't see me coming. I would make sure of it. "Emily, why don't you want to look at some new chairs?" Jessica's voice grated on me as she waved a catalog in my face. I took a slow breath. "Fine. Let's see what's in the catalog." Jake smirked, draping an arm over Jessica's shoulder. "See? That wasn't so hard. Now maybe we can actually make this place livable." Livable. As if it hadn't been home until they decided to show up. But I played along, nodding and looking at the pages she flipped through. "These seem fine," I said mechanically, thinking of the real plan forming in my mind. That evening, as I watched TV with Mom and Dad, I noticed Jake and Jessica whispering in the corner. Jessica's eyes gleamed with something like triumph. I knew they were plotting more changes, more ways to assert control. Dad leaned over to me, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Try to get along with them, Emily. It's just temporary." Temporary. That word stung. "I'll try, Dad," I replied, pushing down my anger. "I just want what's best for us." The next day, I called Sarah, my old friend and a sharp lawyer. She answered on the second ring. "Emily, long time no hear. What's up?" "Hey, Sarah. I need your help with something pretty serious," I said, laying out the situation and the chaos Jake had brought into our lives. Sarah's voice hardened with resolve. "Say no more. Let's meet tomorrow. I'll help you draft something to protect your family." The next morning, I met her in a cozy cafe downtown. We huddled over coffee as she went over the legal plans. "We can draft a lease agreement," she explained, her eyes sharp. "Jake and Jessica won't know what hit them." I felt a sense of relief mixed with determination. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll get their signatures somehow." Back at the apartment, it wasn't hard to find Jake and Jessica lounging around as usual. I approached with a stack of papers in hand. "What's all this?" Jake asked, barely looking up from his phone. "Just some routine family paperwork," I said casually. "Mom and Dad wanted us all to sign it." Jake took the pen, barely glancing at the document. "Sure, whatever." He scribbled his signature, handing the pen to Jessica. Everyone's signatures collected, I excused myself and hurriedly called Sarah. "I got the signatures. What's next?" Sarah replied confidently. "Great job. I'll file the lease agreement immediately. We've got them right where we want them." The next few days were a whirlwind. Jake and Jessica continued to act like they were running the show, totally unaware of the trap they'd just walked into. One evening, Jake bounded into the living room, a look of sheer amusement on his face. "Hey, Em, when are we getting those new chairs delivered?" "Soon," I replied, feeling a sense of victory looming. Later, as we sat down for dinner, Jake received an email on his phone. His face whitened as he read it. "What the hell is this? A rent bill?" I glanced up, trying to mask my satisfaction. "What's wrong, Jake?" "Why are we being billed for rent? This makes no sense," he almost shouted, causing Jessica to clench his arm, looking worried. Dad looked confused. "Rent bill? What are you talking about?" Jake turned the screen for everyone to see. "This says we owe rent for the apartment." Keeping my face neutral, I said, "Jake, didn't you read what you signed? It's a lease agreement." "You tricked us." Jessica hissed, realization dawning painfully. Tricked? No, I'd call it protecting our home, I replied calmly. Jake stood, his face flushed with anger. You won't get away with this, Emily. I kept my ground. You brought this on yourself, Jake. Now you'll face the consequences. The room buzzed with tension as everyone processed this new twist. Mom and Dad looked between us, struggling to understand the gravity. But I felt a sense of vindication. The scales were tipping back in our favor, and Jake's arrogance was finally coming back to bite him. Jake's furious stare was like a storm brewing. Jessica clutched his arm, her face pale. You can't just make us pay rent. That's insane, she shrieked. I remained calm, leaning back in my chair. It's perfectly legal. You both signed the lease. The hell we did. You tricked us, Jake spat, his face contorting with rage. Dad looked shell-shocked. Emily, what is going on here? I met his eyes, trying to remain as composed as possible. Dad, this is our home. Jake and Jessica can't just move in and take over. This ensures they contribute if they want to stay. Jessica's eyes darted around the room, her voice turning cold. This is low, even for you, Emily. Jake stood up, veins bulging on his neck. You think you've won? This isn't over. We're not paying a dime. Oh, you will, I said, voice steady. Or you'll leave. Mom, caught in the middle, looked like she was on the verge of tears. Emily, why would you do this? Because someone has to stand up for us, I replied, not breaking eye contact with Jake. The next few days were tense. Jake and Jessica spent hours in whispered conversations, their voices drifting from room to room like ghosts. I watched from the periphery, waiting for the next blow. One afternoon, I found Sarah in a busy cafe downtown. We hugged and found a corner table. This is really heating up, Sarah, I said. She gave me a determined look. You're doing what's necessary to protect your family. Stand firm, Emily. Returning home, I found Jake in the living room, glaring at a piece of paper. What now? I asked, dreading the answer. It's another bill, utilities. This place is bleeding us dry, he grumbled. I maintained my composure. Contributing is part of living here, Jake. You can always leave. You'd love that, wouldn't you? For us to just disappear? His voice was sharp, accusations hanging in the air. Only if you're not willing to respect our home, I shot back. Jessica entered the room, tossing her phone on the couch. You know, Jake has rights too, Emily. Why are you making this so difficult? Why are you here? I countered. You've brought nothing but chaos since you arrived. Mom stepped in, wringing her hands. Please, all of you, just talk this out. We're trying, Mom, I said, exasperation in my voice. But talking requires respect on both sides. The days dragged on, a cold war of sorts. Then one evening, it exploded. Jake cornered me in the kitchen. You think you're so smart. Well, you've underestimated me. Underestimated your ability to disrupt? I shot back. He stepped closer, his eyes dark. One way or another, I'm staying. And you'll regret this. As tension escalated, I knew this was the climax of our battle. I had to protect what was ours, no matter what came next. The weekend arrived with a delivery at the door. Jake and Jessica had gone ahead with their furniture plans, bringing in new pieces. Dad seemed pleased, but I saw it for what it was, a power move. You okay, Emily? Mom asked, seeing my tight expression. I will be, Mom, I assured her, once they understand what they've done. Jake smirked from across the room. Nice, huh? We're making this place better. For who? I challenged. Don't worry, you'll get used to it, he retorted, arrogance dripping from every word. Jessica added, You need to relax, Emily. This is our home, too. Our home. The words echoed like a mocking chant. I knew their arrogance wouldn't last. They were running out of moves. Later that evening, Jake pounded on my bedroom door. Emily, he shouted, you tricked us with that lease. We're not paying. I opened the door calmly. Then you're leaving. Jake's eyes blazed with anger, but he knew he'd lost this round. I closed the door, feeling the first real sense of victory since their arrival. The storm was far from over, but the tide was turning, and for the first time I saw a flicker of fear in Jake's eyes. That gave me the strength to keep fighting, to protect the life we built, no matter what. Jake and Jessica's mood had gone from complacent to desperate. Bills piled up, and their struggle to meet financial obligations became apparent. Jake tried to keep his composure around everyone, but I could see the cracks forming. He was losing grip. One evening, Jessica paced in the hallway, her voice a frantic whisper. Jake, we need to figure this out. We can't keep up with these expenses. It's too much. Jake's eyes darted around the room, his frustration palpable. I know, Jess, I'm working on it. I just need more time. Time? We don't have time, Jessica snapped. Everything's due. This plan of yours is falling apart. Dad, oblivious to the tension, was watching TV in the living room. But the strain in the air didn't escape Mom's notice. Emily, I'm worried about Jake. He seems very stressed. I looked at her, biting back a retort. Mom, they knew what they signed up for. It's on them to figure it out. Just then, Jake stormed into the room, clearly having reached his breaking point. This is all your fault, Emily. You tricked us, and now we're drowning in bills. I stood my ground, my voice steady. Jake, you agreed to everything. Didn't think things through, did you? You're loving this, aren't you? Watching us struggle? He growled, his face inches from mine. It's not about enjoying your struggle, Jake. It's about showing responsibility for once, I replied. Jessica joined in, her voice trembling with anger. This is insane. We didn't come here to be bled dry. Then maybe you shouldn't have come at all, I said coldly. Dad finally turned his attention from the TV. Emily, Jake, enough of this. We should be supporting each other, not fighting. Jake scoffed. Supporting each other? All I see is Emily enjoying our misery. I sighed. Dad, Mom, I've been supporting this family for years. I won't let Jake and Jessica ruin everything we've worked for. That night, on the balcony, I found Mom silently crying. Emily, please, this fighting, it's tearing us apart. I hugged her tightly. Mom, I'll protect us, I promise. The next morning, Jake's resentment boiled over as he and Jessica had another argument. This is your mess, Jake. You dragged me into this. Jessica screamed. Oh, so now it's all my fault? Jake shot back. You wanted to come here, remember? It's not what I signed up for. Jessica's voice cracked, tears welling up. I watched from the kitchen, this spectacle confirming that their unity was falling apart. They didn't notice me as I moved past them, the tension thick in the air. Late that night, I heard a commotion. Rushing out, I found Jake in a heated argument with Dad. I'm sick of this. I can't take it anymore, Jake yelled, his fists clenched. Dad tried to calm him down. Son, let's talk about this. You don't have to leave. Jake's face was a mix of anger and despair. I'm out. I'm done playing Emily's game. Jessica emerged, suitcases in hand. We're leaving, she declared, her eyes swollen from crying. Mom watched in stunned silence as they stormed out. Jake paused at the door, giving me one last glare. This isn't over, Emily. You'll regret this. As the door slammed behind him, I exhaled, the weight lifting slightly from my shoulders. The silence that followed was thick, a somber relief settling over the apartment. Mom looked at me, tears falling freely. Emily. I held her close, whispering, It's going to be all right, Mom. We'll rebuild, without them. That moment, I felt a mix of triumph and sadness. The battle had been grueling, but our home was ours again. I knew Jake might try to strike back, but for now the storm had passed. We could finally breathe again, a new chapter awaiting to be written. The days after Jake and Jessica left were surprisingly calm. A rare quiet settled over the apartment, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd brought. But the calm couldn't last. I knew Jake wouldn't let it go that easily. It was a crisp morning when I got the call. Emily, it's Jake. I need help. His voice was strained, almost desperate. Help? After everything? I said, not concealing my disbelief. I messed up. Jessica's gone. I'm out of money. I need a place to stay, Jake admitted, his tone devoid of his usual arrogance. I took a deep breath, trying to process his words. Jake, you put us through hell. You expect me to just open the door for you? Please, Emily, I've got nowhere else to go, he pleaded, his voice breaking. I hesitated, the memories of his manipulations still fresh. Let me think about it, I replied, hanging up before he could argue. Over dinner, I brought it up with Mom and Dad. Jake called. He wants to come back. Mom's eyes lit up with hope. He should come home, Emily. He's still your brother. Dad, however, looked conflicted. He caused a lot of trouble, Em, but he's family. I knew they'd ultimately leave it up to me. I decided to sleep on it, weighing the risks of letting him back in. The next day, Jake showed up at the door, a shadow of his former self. His face looked gaunt, his eyes hollow. Emily. I stared at him, calculating the sincerity in his plea. All right, Jake, you can stay, but you follow the rules this time. He nodded vigorously. Thank you, Emily, I won't let you down. But part of me remained skeptical. Jake had always been a chameleon, changing his colors when it suited him. Would this time be different? As the days went on, Jake tried to fit back in. He helped around the apartment, kept a low profile, and avoided any confrontations. Still, I couldn't shake the lingering distrust. Then one evening, while we were all watching a movie, Jake suddenly snapped. "Why did you force me out, Emily? Why did you make me go through all that?" Caught off guard, I shot back. "Jake, you brought it on yourself. You were out of control." "So you ruined my life?" he shouted, rage bubbling to the surface. "I lost Jessica, my savings, everything because of you." I held my ground. "You gambled with our home, Jake. I did what I had to do to protect us." He lunged forward, and instinctively, I pushed back. The scuffle turned physical until Dad intervened, pulling Jake away. "Enough," he roared. "This has to stop." Breathing heavily, I looked at Jake, who was now sitting on the floor, defeated. "You need help, Jake, real help." He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Emily. I don't know what to do anymore." I reached out a hand, helping him up. "We'll figure it out together." But things have to change. That marked a turning point. Jake agreed to see a counselor, and gradually, the house started healing. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For the first time in a long while, we were working together as a family, not against each other. The scars of the past were still there, but they were slowly fading. Jake's desperation had broken through his facade, revealing the brother I remembered before all the chaos. As I watched him genuinely try to improve, I felt a cautious optimism. The storm was behind us, and though the path ahead was uncertain, it was a path we were now willing to walk together. The power struggle was over. Finally, there was a chance for real peace. A month had passed since Jake started going to counseling. The apartment felt lighter without the constant tension, and it seemed like every member of our family was slowly rebuilding. But the road ahead was still bumpy. One evening, I sat in the kitchen, going through some bills. Jake walked in, cautiously approaching the dining table. "Emily, can we talk?" I looked up, wary but open. "What's on your mind?" Jake sat down, rubbing his hands together nervously. "I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I'm trying to make things right. I thought maybe I could get a job and help out more." I was taken aback. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Yeah, I need to pull my weight. I need to show you all that I can change." It was a genuine moment that hit me hard. "All right, Jake, let's start by seeing what jobs are out there." We spent the next hour looking through job postings, a small but significant step forward. Days turned into weeks, and Jake managed to land a job at a local hardware store. He came home one evening with a rare smile. "Got through my first week, Emily. It feels good." I gave him a nod. "I'm proud of you, Jake. Keep it up." As Jake settled into his new routine, the family dynamics began to shift again. Dad and I worked together to improve the apartment, painting walls, fixing doors, simple acts that renewed our bond. Even Mom, who had always been the peacekeeper, seemed more relaxed. One Saturday, we all gathered in the living room. Dad brought out some old photo albums. "Remember these?" he said, flipping through the pages. Mom's eyes sparkled as she saw old family pictures. "Oh, look, there's Jake and Emily at the beach." Jake leaned in, his smile genuine. "We had good times," he admitted softly. I nodded, letting go of some of the resentment I'd held onto for so long. "We did." As we reminisced, I felt the lingering tension start to dissolve. We were healing, slowly but surely. This newfound peace, tentative as it was, felt fragile but real. That night, Jake approached me. "Emily, I know I have a long way to go, but thank you for giving me another chance." I looked at him, seeing a glimmer of the brother I once knew. "Just keep moving forward, Jake. We're in this together." Life settled into a new rhythm. Jake kept up with his job, and his therapy sessions seemed to make a real difference. He even started saving money, contributing to the household expenses. It was a start, a way of showing he was serious about making amends. One afternoon, Dad pulled me aside. "Emily, you've grown into such a strong woman. I'm proud of you for standing up for us, even when it was hard." I hugged him, feeling the emotional weight lift. "Thanks, Dad. I just did what I had to do." And just like that, the balance in our family began to stabilize. We weren't perfect, but we were working through our issues, one day at a time. The drama that had defined the past months gave way to a tentative peace. As I looked around the home we'd fought so hard to protect, I felt a sense of accomplishment. We'd faced the storm and come out stronger. Jake's return, once a looming threat, had transformed into an opportunity for us to reconnect and rebuild. That evening, we sat down for dinner, a simple meal that felt like a feast given the tension we'd previously endured. Jake raised his glass, an awkward but heartfelt gesture. "To new beginnings," he said. "To new beginnings," we echoed, clinking glasses. In that moment, surrounded by my family, the past shadows seemed to fade. We had a long journey ahead, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like we were on the right path. The apartment was more than just a home again. It was a place of hope, resilience, and a newfound sense of unity. And as the night wore on, filled with laughter and conversation, I realized that we were finally starting to heal. We were moving forward together.